Listen, I'm going to tell you something that will probably get me canceled on Twitter, but someone needs to say it. You know what I see when I look around? People in their 30s, successful people, attractive people, intelligent people choosing to stay single. And before you start typing your underscore, quote underscore, zero underscore diagnosis in the comments, let me ask you something. When was the last time you saw someone rush into a relationship in their 30s and it actually worked out? I mean, actually worked out. Not just looked good on social media for 6 months before the inevitable breakup post. Take your time, I'll wait. You can't think of many, can you? And there's a reason for that. We've reached a point where staying single in your 30s isn't a red flag anymore. It's a green light. It's not settling. It's strategizing. It's like choosing to rent in a volatile housing market instead of buying at the peak. You understand what I'm saying? The timing just makes more sense now. Let me paint you a picture. Imagine you're playing a video game and you finally reach level 30. You've grinded through your 20s. You've unlocked skills. You've accumulated resources. You've learned from all your previous failed attempts. Now the game is offering you a quest. Enter a partnership dungeon with random player assignment. 60% chance of losing half your experience points and resources. 30% chance of moderate success but constant maintenance required. 10% chance of genuine reward. Would you take that quest? Or would you keep leveling up solo, mastering your character, accumulating wealth, and waiting for a co-op opportunity that actually makes sense? The math has changed. And people in their 30s are finally doing the calculation correctly. I had this conversation with a friend last month. She's 33, runs her own business, travels quarterly, owns her apartment, the whole package. She tells me, quote 2, I ask her why. You know what she says? Quote 3. And here's the thing that nobody wants to admit. Your 30s are too valuable to waste on mediocre relationships. It's like finally affording a nice car and then letting someone who doesn't know how to drive it take the wheel. You've worked too hard to get here to settle for someone who doesn't add to what you've built. But let me tell you the real shift that's happening. It's not just about avoiding bad relationships. It's about the complete evolution of what your 30s actually mean. A generation ago, if you were single at 35, people assumed something was wrong with you. You were damaged goods, past your prime, desperate. My aunt got married at 22 to a guy she barely knew, because that's what you did. By 35, she had 3 kids, a mortgage, and a husband who thought parenting was, quote, 4. She spent her 30s exhausted, trapped, and wondering what happened to her dreams. She's 60 now and tells me her 30s were the lost decade. Now, being single at 35 means you probably have your shit together. You've got savings instead of baby debt. You've got a passport full of stamps instead of stretch marks you didn't choose. You've got career momentum instead of a 5-year resume gap. You've got therapy sessions under your belt instead of resentment built up over years. Your 30s are when you finally become the person you were trying to be in your 20s. And now we're supposed to hand that over to someone who swipes right and expects you to reorganize your entire life around their schedule? The math isn't mathing. Let's talk about the pressure machine that society has built around being single in your 30s. It's relentless. Every family gathering, quote 5, every wedding, quote 6, with a creepy wink. Every social media scroll, engagement photos, pregnancy announcements, couple vacations. The message is clear. You're falling behind. You're missing out. Your eggs are drying up, your sperm count is dropping, you're going to die alone eaten by cats. But here's what they don't tell you. Those people posting their perfect relationship photos, half of them are arguing in the car on the way home. The engagement photos with the sunset and the perfect proposal. He had to be nagged for 3 years before he finally did it. The pregnancy announcement that everyone congratulates. That couple hasn't had a conversation and that wasn't about the baby in 6 months. The vacation photos? They're not talking to each other, just taking content. I know this guy. Let's call him Marcus. 36 years old, software architect, makes $180,000 a year, owns a condo in the city, works out 5 times a week. Every time he sees his married friends, they tell him he's lucky. Quote 7, these are guys who supposedly won at life by getting married, and they're telling him he's the lucky one. The cognitive dissonance is extraordinary. Here's what nobody talks about, the economics of being single in your 30s. When you're in your 20s and single, you're broken single. You're eating ramen, living with roommates, taking the bus. Being single isn't a choice. It's a circumstance. But when you're in your 30s and single, you're making real money. You've got investments. You've got a career, not just a job. And every dollar you earn stays in your ecosystem. Want to drop $3,000 on a spontaneous trip to Japan? Do it. Want to invest in that course that costs $2,500? Done. Want to buy the expensive espresso machine? No consultation needed. Want to order Uber Eats 3 nights in a row because you're tired? Nobody's judging your fiscal responsibility. Your money works for your happiness, not for compromise. Compare that to your coupled friends. They're having budget meetings about whether they can afford a $40 dinner. They're arguing about whose turn it is to buy groceries. They're splitting every expense down the middle and keeping mental tallies. Well, I paid for the last vacation, so you should pay for this one. They've turned their relationship into an accounting firm. I had coffee with an old colleague last week. She's 34, married, combined household income of $250,000. Sounds great, right? She tells me they're arguing about whether they can afford a $1,200 couch. I'm sitting there single, making $120,000, and I just bought a $2,000 couch last month because I liked it. Didn't need to consult anyone, didn't need to compromise on the color, didn't need to wait for a underscore quote underscore 9 underscore. I saw it, liked it, bought it. That's the difference. Let's address the elephant in the room. Dating in your 30s. Everyone says it gets harder. And you know what? They're right. But not for the reasons they think. It doesn't get harder because there are fewer options. It gets harder because your standards finally match your self-worth. In your 20s, you'll date anyone with a pulse and a decent profile picture. You'll waste 6 months with someone who's figuring things out. You'll ignore red flags the size of Texas because you don't want to be alone. In your 30s, you smell bullshit from 3 miles away. Someone says they're quote 11? Deleted. Someone quote 12? Blocked. Someone quote 13? Next. You've been through enough nonsense to know that when someone shows you who they are the first time, you believe them. This is what I tell people I coach. Dating in your 30s is like shopping at a thrift store after you've developed expensive taste. Sure, there might be something good in there. But you're not going to spend 3 hours digging through garbage to find one decent shirt when you can just buy exactly what you want at full price, or not buy anything at all. The apps are full of people who didn't work on themselves in their 20s and are now bringing all that baggage into their 30s. Divorced with 2 kids and a vindictive ex. Still living with parents, quote 14. 3 years sober, which is great, but also means they spent their 20s as a mess. Quote 15, which means unemployed with a podcast nobody listens to. And they all want someone who has their life together to fix them. Here's what being single in your 30s actually gives you. Time. Not just clock time. Strategic developmental time. You know what I did in the 4 years I stayed single in my early 30s? I learned Spanish. Got a promotion. Started investing seriously. Went to therapy and actually processed my childhood trauma instead of dumping it on a partner. Developed hobbies that actually matter to me. Built friendships that will last longer than most marriages. You know what my coupled friends did in that same time? Argued about whose family to visit for holidays. Compromised on where to live. Negotiated about whether to get a dog. Went to their partner's work events they didn't care about. Watched shows they didn't want to watch. Ate at restaurants they didn't choose. Had mediocre sex on a schedule. Pretended to be interested in their partner's boring stories. I'm not saying relationships can't add value. I'm saying most relationships don't. And in your 30s, you finally have enough life experience to know the difference. You've seen enough bad relationships to know what you don't want. You've been in enough mediocre relationships to know that companionship isn't worth the cost if the companion is mid. There's this woman I know. Let's call her Sarah. She's 38 now. She stayed single from 31 to 37. Everyone told her she was being too picky. She needed to settle. Her biological clock was ticking. She'd end up alone. You know what she did instead? She built a consulting business that generates $400,000 a year. She bought a house. She traveled to 30 countries. She became fluent in French. She learned to cook properly. She did a decade's worth of personal growth in 6 years. Then at 37, she met someone who actually matched her energy. Someone who added to her life instead of subtracting from it. Someone who respected what she'd built instead of feeling threatened by it. And you know what she told me? Quote 16. Let's talk about the biological clock, because it's the biggest manipulation tool used against people in their 30s. Quote 17, quote 18, quote 19. The fear-mongering is insane. And you know what's interesting? It's always directed at the people who would actually make good parents. The people who are responsible, financially stable, emotionally mature. Nobody's telling the 23-year-old working at Starbucks that she needs to hurry up and have kids. Here's what they don't tell you. Medical technology has advanced. Fertility treatments exist. Adoption exists. Co-parenting exists. You can freeze your eggs. You can freeze your sperm. You can have kids at 40 and they turn out fine. But more importantly, not everyone needs to have kids. That's the real secret they don't want you to know. Having children is optional. It's not a requirement for a fulfilling life. It's not what gives your existence meaning. I know people who had kids in their early 20s. You know what they're doing now in their 30s? Regretting it. Wishing they'd traveled. Wishing they'd built careers. Wishing they'd lived a little before becoming full-time parents. And I know people who had kids in their late 30s or early 40s. You know what they say? I'm so glad I waited. I couldn't have been this good of a parent at the 25. I didn't have the patience and the money or the life experience. The biological clock is real for reproduction, but it's not real for happiness. You know what actually declines rapidly after 30? Your tolerance for bullshit, your willingness to settle, your capacity to pretend you care about things that don't matter. And that's a good thing. Being single in your 30s teaches you something that people in long-term relationships never learn. Complete self-sufficiency. You learn to be happy alone. You learn that your mood doesn't depend on someone else's text message. You learn that Friday night can be just as fulfilling with a good book as with a mediocre date. You learn to enjoy your own company, which is the most underrated skill in modern life. People in relationships become codependent without realizing it. They need their partner's validation to make decisions. They need their partner's presence to enjoy experiences. They panic when they're alone for a weekend. They don't know who they are outside of, quote, 21. It's like watching someone forget how to walk because they've been using a wheelchair for so long. Single people in their 30s? We know exactly who we are. We've had no choice but to figure it out. We've sat with ourselves long enough to know our values, our boundaries, our deal breakers, our non-negotiables. We've built lives that work for us, not lives that accommodate someone else. I was at dinner recently with a group of friends. One of them married, said she couldn't remember the last time she did something just for herself. Not for her husband, not for her kids, not for her job. Just for her. And everyone at the table who was coupled nodded like this was normal. Like it was expected. Like self-sacrifice was a virtue. And I'm sitting there thinking, I did 3 things just for myself today. I went to a museum exhibit I wanted to see. I had lunch at the place I wanted to try. I spent an hour reading without feeling guilty. The difference in quality of the life is staggering. Here's what happens when you stay single through your 30s. Your filter gets really, really good. You've dated enough people to know what you want and what you absolutely don't. You're not desperate. You're not settling. You're not willing to twist yourself into a pretzel to make someone like you. When you're in your 20s, you think love is supposed to be hard. You think drama means passion. You think if you're not fighting and making up, it's boring. You confuse toxicity with intensity. You stay in bad relationships for years because you've already invested so much time. In your 30s, you know better. You know that good relationships are easy. They're peaceful. There's no guessing, no games, no anxiety about whether they'll text back. You know that if someone wants to be with you, they'll make it clear. If they don't, all the trying in the world won't change it. This filter means you reject 99% of potential partners. And that's exactly the point. You're not trying to find someone, anyone. You're trying to find the right someone. Or you're perfectly happy finding no one. Both options are better than finding the wrong someone and wasting your 30s trying to make it work. I know a guy who got divorced at 33. He'd gotten married at 27 to his college girlfriend because that's what you do, right? By 33, they had nothing in common. Different values, different goals, different ideas about life. The divorce cost him $80,000 in 2 years of his life. Now he's 36 single. And he tells me, quote, 22, and let's talk about market dynamics because they've shifted dramatically. In your 20s, everyone is competing for the same pool of people. It's crowded, it's chaotic, it's a race to couple up before the music stops. But in your 30s, the dating market actually improves for people who've used their time well. The people who stayed single and worked on themselves. They're catches. They've got careers, savings, stability, emotional intelligence, life experience. They're not desperate. They're selective. And they have options. Good options. Meanwhile, the people who rushed into relationships in their 20s and are now divorced, they're back on the market with baggage, debt, and trauma. The people who never worked on themselves, they're still the same person they were at 25, just older and more bitter. The people who settled, they're realizing they made a mistake, but feeling trapped. If you're single and thriving in your 30s, you're actually in the driver's seat. You're not competing with everyone anymore. You're competing with a much smaller pool of people who also have their shit together. And from that pool, you get to choose. Or not choose. Both options are good. So yeah, being single in your 30s might actually be the smart move, not because relationships are bad, not because you should give up on love, but because your 30s are too important to waste on relationships that don't enhance your life. You've worked too hard to get where you are to settle for someone who makes it worse. The solution isn't to force a relationship because society says you should. The solution is to build a life so good that a relationship would have to be absolutely exceptional to improve it. And if that exceptional relationship never comes, you've still built an exceptional life. You want my advice? Stop apologizing for being single in your 30s. Stop feeling like you need to justify it. Stop listening to people who peaked in their 20s and are now miserable in mediocre marriages. Your 30s are yours. Use them wisely. Focus on yourself. Build your wealth, health, and happiness. And if someone comes along who adds to that, great. If not, you've lost nothing and gained everything. For the people who are panicking about being single at 35, ask yourself this. Are you actually unhappy being single? Or are you unhappy about what other people think about you being single? Because those are two very different problems. One requires finding a partner. The other requires finding better people to care about. This isn't about being anti-relationship. This is about being pro-yourself. And until more people understand that distinction, they're going to keep rushing into relationships they shouldn't be in, settling for people they shouldn't settle for, and wondering why they're so unhappy. Being single in your 30s isn't a failure. It's not something to fix. It's not a problem that needs solving. For a lot of people, it's exactly where they should be. It's the strategic play. It's the smart move. It's the path that leads to the life they actually want instead of the life they were told they should want. And the irony? The people who figure this out early and embrace being single in their 30s are the ones who end up in the best relationships later because they know who they are. They know what they want. They know what they won't tolerate. And they know that being alone is always better than being with the wrong person. So the next time someone asks you why you're still single in your 30s, smile and tell them the truth. Because I'm smart enough to wait for something great instead of settling for something mediocre. Because I value myself too much to accept less than I deserve. Because I'm building a life that doesn't need another person to complete it, only to complement it. And that, as they say, is the smartest move you can make.